evening. I'm Manisha Dostert. I am one of the 3 priests here at Christ Church Cranbrook. It's an Episcopal church, and we are just honored to have you all here. We have been partnering with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office for a couple years now. Then this church has worked supporting their programs. We help with the Cops and Cribs. We help with the Sheriff Pals program. We've helped sponsor the trunk or treat that's been in Pontiac, and we've just really enjoyed being part of their good work out in the community. And so we're deeply honored to be able to continue that good work here and allow you to use this beautiful space to be able to hear some of the important things that are happening in our community. And on behalf of Father Bill Danaher, who's the rector of Christ Church Cranbrook, who is out of country right now, he sends his welcome and warm greetings to you all. Please feel free to come anytime and be part of the church and its activities in both this area and the community and the world. I'm honored to be able to introduce to you the sponsors of tonight. These are the Oakland County-based Realtor associations. And so we will have 2 speakers, Nathan Boji, who's the past president of the Greater Metropolitan Association of Realtors, and Pat Jacobs, who's the executive officer from the North Oakland County Board of Realtors. Each of you will say a couple words. So thank you.
Thanks, Manisha. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for hosting tonight in your beautiful church and having us all out. So thank you. As Manisha said, my name is Nathan Boji. I'm with Remax Classic. I'm a member and the immediate past president for the Greater Metropolitan Association of Realtors. GMAR, Greater Metropolitan Association of Realtors, we're made up of realtors throughout Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb counties, servicing all the different communities as a part. And on behalf of all of them, Sheriff Bouchard, thank you so much for having us out today and for all the efforts that you and your team do for our communities. So a little bit about kind of what realtor associations do. Everybody, I think, knows what a real estate agent is, but what's a realtor association? So GMAR, we take pride in our advocacy for our communities, for home ownership and for housing. And we do this through a couple different ways. Last week, there were a number of us that spent a week in Washington, D.C., talking to different legislators, both through congressmen and women and senators, discussing housing issues, both from everything from affordability, tax implications, inventory issues, and issues that are facing our veterans as it relates to home ownership. That's on the national level. Locally, we host different events with our local elected officials to discuss all of these issues locally and how they're affecting each and every one of our communities and right in our backyards. And our hope in having those events with the local officials are so that way they can go back to their teams and get more information out to our communities and to better help educate people on all the different housing issues and also get information back to where we can have that sort of back and forth conversation with them and make sure that we're advocating for the right things as well. On top of just talking to elected officials, we also go directly back to our communities. And one of the things that we're really proud about at GMAR is our placemaking program, which allows us to raise funds and give funds to different communities for different parks and community projects that are needing some assistance. And one easy reference is the Realtor Park located in Royal Oak. If you're ever in Royal Oak, stop by and have some fun with the dog or the kids or whomever. And one of the things that I really wanted to express is that a conversation that happens with nearly every person that we come in contact with that's looking to buy or sell real estate is just making sure they're safe. And so for all the efforts that Sheriff Bouchard and your team do to make sure our communities are safe and people enjoy home ownership, we really appreciate it. So thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Pat Jacobs.
Sheriff, it's good to see you this evening. A friend of mine for 40 years, close to it, hey? Yeah, sure. Except he's about 15 years younger, so it's okay though. I still like you. I'm here as the Association Director for the North Oakland County Board of Realtors, consisting of 7,500 members that do exactly those things that the Greater Metropolitan Association of Realtors do. We, however, are in the North Oakland County area, Waterford, and but we have members from throughout the state. And I'm privileged to say that because we've been working a long time. I've been with the association 43 years and have no plans to retire, Sheriff. So let me tell you a little bit about the sheriff. He was born in Flint, Michigan. I learned that very little. We're going to talk a little about you, but we're going to do some accolades that people don't know. After he graduated from Brother Rice, he attended MSU, criminal law, criminal justice, police administration, and after serving in local law enforcement for 13 years, Mike took a turn to the political field and served from 91 to 95 in the House of Representatives. And then he became a senator. So it's hard to say whether we should call him senator, which is a lifelong name once you're a senator, or do we call you sheriff? But for those years of 95 to 99, Mike served in the Senate, the Michigan Senate. However, the untimely death of longtime Sheriff John Nichols in December of 98 led to the appointment of Mike as Oakland County Sheriff, and as a matter of fact, in November of 2012, the sheriff was elected to a fourth consecutive term as Oakland County Sheriff by an overwhelming majority, the largest number of votes cast for any candidate in Oakland County, and has been elected. Right, that's why I did it. And he's been elected 6 times. Are we lucky or what, huh? So in 2016, Mike was named Sheriff of the Year by the National Association, the Sheriff's Association, and in 2019, in recognition of his 33 years of service, he was named Michigan Master Sheriff. I introduce you to my friend and your sheriff, our sheriff, Michael Bouchard.
Thank you. I didn't know I was going to get my obituary read, but I guess we're in the right building, so now we'll know what it will sound like. Thank you all for coming. Part of the genesis was that a number of my friends who are realtors were asking me a lot of questions. They were hearing from their customers, their clients, and their friends, and one particular question, which I will remember to answer or talk about during this evening, came from a realtor, and it's a really good question. So it's a teaser to keep you here. It's kind of like when my wife watches HGTV. You go, and then they go to commercial. But hopefully the reason we're here, and thank you all for coming. I know it's a great night out, and given our schizophrenic weather, you're giving up a really nice night out to be here. But the point of this was to provide information to all of you and answer any questions you have about some of the trends and things we're seeing. Because a lot of people have been calling me and calling the chief and the captain about these kinds of crimes, wanting to know what they can do, how can they become less likely to be a victim, and all those things. We're going to try to answer all of that for you tonight. As I mentioned on a radio interview, a lot of people that have my phone number ask me these questions, so this is for anyone that doesn't have the phone number. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask any question they have to try to get you better understanding and prepared. My first recommendation, and sometimes those will jump off my head as I hear it. So when we heard that the main priest is out of town, somebody's staying in his house, and you should never tell people when you go out of town, and don't post it on social media. If you really want to post pictures of your amazing fun vacation, when you get back, say, here's a download of my pictures while I was wherever, and do all those kind of things that my daughter does. You know, she sticks her leg out and kind of, you know, does the selfies. But do it when you get home, because otherwise you're telling the whole world, and you don't know who's looking at it, I'm out of town. So that just jumped into me as one of our important tips. I'm going to introduce Chief Gallagher, a good friend, Bloomfield Township, a big partner in this effort. And you want to introduce the captain, and we'll kind of get things rolling pretty quick.
I do. Chief Jim Gallagher from Bloomfield Township. I've been there about 2 years now as the chief, been there 24 years overall. To my right is Captain Tom Vance Mays from Bloomfield Hills Department of Public Safety. Tom and I hired on about the same time together, and he's been an instrumental part, especially for the incidents that have occurred in Bloomfield Hills, and with intel gathering and sharing amongst the agency. When the sheriff created the SEMCAP task force, Captain Tom Vance Mays was one of the leaders of that group that we brought in as well. So, and we're in his hometown here where he protects. So here we are.
So there's been a number of communities in Oakland County have been hit. It's really not community specific. It's more home and target specific. But obviously the Bloomfields have been very much in the crosshairs. Birmingham, Novi, Franklin, Farmington Hills, Oakland Township, Rochester Hills. I mean, you can name a bunch of them, but obviously the Bloomfields have been very much part of the targeting. And so we're going to go through a little PowerPoint and kind of give you some of the background. And what we started, the chief mentioned SEMCAP. It's a task force. I asked all the chiefs in Southeast Michigan to come together and ask them to join a task force that would be focused on this, because a big part of it is to share information, intelligence, resources. If somebody gets hit in one town, everyone is quickly alerted, and we can all start looking, going into the neighborhoods that we think may be targeted, and we've done that a bunch. There have been a number of nights and weekends where all of us have put out a whole bunch of people and nothing happened. But that's sometimes part of the job, because you don't know for sure what's going to happen with some of these crews. So the background in it is basically this. We learned that we were being targeted by transnational, what they're calling nationally as tourist burglars, but they're basically gangs that have come from other countries to commit certain kinds of crimes. There's three buckets it kind of falls into: high-end home burglaries, jewelry, either robbery of jewelry stores or jewelry carriers, and then LFAs, larceny from autos. Those are the three buckets. For us, it's been heavily into the high-end homes with some jewelry robberies. So 2 teams have been arrested here in Oakland County. One doing jewelry robberies. They were caught, the Violent Crime Task Force, after they held up a store at Great Lakes, and that was the second one they had hit in Oakland County. And they were put in my jail. And then another team that did high-end burglaries here were caught. All 7 of those individuals were from Chile. And all 7 had violated the visa waiver program, where it's a shortened process to get into the country with a much lower level of background information. And so as we began to dig deeper and learn, I'm head of government affairs for Major County Sheriffs of America, so I immediately reached out to all of my colleagues in the country, the sheriff from LA, the sheriff from down in Florida, the sheriff from New York, and said, what are you seeing? And unbeknownst to me, because before it started here, they were already starting to get hit. And the trend is such that then I met with a bunch of folks to get briefed, intelligence briefings, somewhat public and some very not public, some classified. And I learned, as I think we all did as we went in this process, just the Chilean gangs are estimated to have more than 100 teams operating in the country at any given time. And the teams are 3 to 6 people. So the team that we caught, one was 3 and one was 4, the 2 teams. So very much in line with that intelligence. And they move around the country. So they'll hit an area for maybe 1 or 2 weekends after they do a lot of pre-operational surveillance. Sometimes their pre-op surveillance means cameras in and around your house, not necessarily in, but around your house, trail cams, battery-operated cameras, things like that. Sometimes they've used trackers on cars, and sometimes we've now seen drones that have been utilized across the country. So they try to determine when you move, when you come and go, when you're out of town, when you're out to dinner, what your patterns of life are. And then they, once they establish a target list, then they're methodical about hitting those homes. What we've seen typically with the Chileans is they're contact averse. If they get to a house and surprise, Tom came home from college and they didn't expect anybody in the house, they have fled. That's the Chileans. What we've seen in other parts of the country, the Colombians are not so contact averse. So they have been more violent in other parts of the country. We've seen mostly the Chileans. We've seen homes get hit and they fled if somebody was home. A light gets turned on by somebody that's there and they actually see someone running. So that has been a pattern, but it's not something we can count on, especially we know for a fact that Colombians were in our county 2 weeks ago. So that's kind of the trend we're seeing. And then the third bucket, jewelry, high-end burglaries, LFAs, larceny from autos. That means typically when they go to like a big parking lot, a mall, or an office, they smash windows, grab whatever they can in the car if they see a purse or they see something of value. That's more something we've not seen a lot of here. California's getting hammered by that. So those are the kinds of three buckets. The way we're seeing them arrive here, again, the Chileans are the VWP, the Visa Waiver Program. That's the only country in South America that is allowed to use the VWP, the Visa Waiver Program. We've asked the administration to shut the VWP off until there's some kind of handle on how many teams and people are coming here, because that doesn't mean they can't come visit. They just have to get a traditional visa like the rest of South America. And that comes with a higher level of scrutiny and background and information they share as a requirement with the federal government. But so far, that program has not been terminated or even put on pause. And in fact, Colombia has an application pending now for the VWP. So that's a concern to us because we can't get a handle on how many teams are operating here. And we may catch a team or 2 or 3 or even 10, but if there's 100 and there's 100 more in the pipeline, because they're well trained. They come here extremely well trained, and we'll show you some of the video, but they operate very much like a spec ops team, a special operation. One person may be the person that's focused on breaching, getting in the home, popping the window, going through it, not opening it. The other person may be their electronic warfare person, the person that jams the alarm systems that are wireless, and he's got the electronic components. They got backpacks and masks, and they're all ninja'd up. Somebody else may have a backpack that's got breaching tools to try to brute force safes or to do things to break things apart in the house. And you'll see some of this on the video. So they're very quick. They know what they're going for. They've done pre-op typically in the home. They get in, they get what they want. They're not shy about it. You'll see in the video where in some of the videos where they're running safes, downstairs, very much caught on camera, but a lot of these homes are very secluded. So they're not necessarily concerned a neighbor can see it. And one of the realtors that actually kind of the genesis of this idea for a town hall asked me the question because in a real case, that realtor got a call from one of their customers who said, I'm in Colorado, I think was the state, but I'm not sure. But in any event, they were out of state, and they could see someone on their cameras at home. And they didn't know how to get their local police. Because if they dial 911, they would get the local 911. And so, just a good idea, put your local police in your phone as a contact. And if it's not us, if it's Bloomfield Township or Bloomfield Hills, whoever it is, put them in your contacts. So if you see something on your camera and you're in Florida, you can call your local non-emergency number and get right to the right police department. Because lots of times people don't actually know where they live. It sounds strange, but it really isn't. Because you may live in Bloomfield Township, but have a Bloomfield Hills mailing. Or you may be in Birmingham mailing, but not be in the city of Birmingham. And a lot of that goes on all across Oakland County. So who your police department is, non-emergency, put in your contacts. So that's one of the first tips of the night. And I'll get into this. Anything you want to kick off with? This is basically the definition of the transnational organized crime, the different groups. And I kind of went through it, so we don't need to get deep into definitions, but you can see they work across international boundaries, they commit crimes, and they ship a lot of the resources back to their country of origin. So the transnational theft groups that are traveling throughout the country, typically they come in one of two ways. What I've already talked about, the VWP, the Visa Waiver Program, or they're crossing the southern border illegally. So the Colombians are across the southern border. The Venezuelans across the southern border. The Chileans tend to be, because they have the VWP, utilize that program, and as soon as they get in, they get false identification and then begin to move across the country committing the crimes. Usually, right after they commit a crime, they oftentimes box it up and ship it to pre-positioned fences across the country. Usually the fences are in California, New York, or Florida. If they believe they're compromised, they leave that area of operation. They may discard the identification they used in that area. They've got multiple identifications. Some of the ones most recently caught had Puerto Rican identification, and a lot of the police agencies and police officers don't really know foreign identification well, so they really don't know what to look for to verify if it's valid. And we don't have access to national or international databases right now. So that's one of the things they count on. They've actually had crews that have been caught in some states that have the no bond kind of thing. They get out, they throw that identification away, start carrying the new one, and they move on to a different state. So the different criminal actors that have been seen in the country, it lists a number of countries, but again, primarily what we're seeing is Chilean, Colombian, and now I know New York is having some issues with Venezuelan gangs. It lists some of the other ones. We've not seen any of those, and they don't rise to the same level of activity that we've seen across the country. So the targets that we're seeing is jewelry, precious metal, high-end clothing, purse, electronics, sort of, but cash. So your house. Everyone in here has a place where you hide your valuables. Most of the time they know generally where you hide your valuables because most people put it where it's easily accessible. It's usually in the bedroom area, the walk-in closet, somewhere where you can get to it, because you don't want, if you have a hiding spot or a safe in the basement, you don't want to go down there because it's not as convenient. So they know all that, and sometimes people put safes in their closets and up in the master bedroom. Master bedroom, first target. And typically what we're seeing, cash, large amounts of cash, jewelry, very high-end watches they love, high-end purses, they love those. So they know what they're looking for, and they know what to ignore. So again, they're well-trained, and they get in and out with that kind of thing. Typically, when they steal these things, it's sold for 20 to 30 cents on the dollar. And lots of times that's immediately monetized and shipped back to their country of origin. We actually know, and I think it's later in this presentation, where they have, you've seen people have the swipe cards on credit cards with a little handheld square device. They have something that's proprietary to Chile, and it swipes and immediately the money's already there. So if they get access to credit cards or they liquidate valuables and get it onto debit cards or some other kind of currency, then they just swipe it and immediately it's exported. So the patterns we kind of talked about already, that they surveil neighborhoods, especially those that are vulnerable to being private. So everything that we love in life about being private now becomes a vulnerability. And everything we used to know about burglaries in the old days, people didn't like to burglarize a house at the end of a dead end because it was one way in, one way out. They love that because if you're at the end of the dead end, usually they're coming from the back and they go out that way. So we've had, burglaries in very, very secluded homes. That's their target of choice. We've had burglaries in gated communities that typically you would think in the past there's no easy way out. So they look for those kinds of things. Typically the hours, again, it's not locked guaranteed, but 5 to 9. So not in the middle of the night typically. Lots of times people are out for dinner. They prefer, as we talk about, the isolated back. Lots of times it's through the second story. A lot of people don't have motion detectors on their second floor. Put a motion detector on every floor. Make them hardwired, and I'll get into that in a minute. If you can, if you have the ability. Some older homes, it's tougher to wire there, but if you can, you want hardwired devices redundant. So if you've got, if they're not opening the door or the window, it's never going to set the contacts off. So you have to have a motion, sometimes glass breaks, but we've seen glass breaks defeated too. So I like hardwired motions on every floor. Lots of times they come through the neighborhoods, again, from the back, through secluded areas. Oftentimes they have backup people as crew members that may be driving the area looking for any cars or any people that are approaching, or if there's some problem, they can rush in and help them out, which has happened in the past where they had a problem with their one original getaway car, a second car came in, picked them all up, and they fled. We talked about the visa waiver program. As I said, Colombia is the only one in South America that has it. These are all the countries that currently participate, but the only one in South America is Colombia. So the VWP, we don't need to get, again, too deep into it, but it doesn't have the same level of information or vetting that is through a traditional visa. So here's what we suggest for you. First, if you have an alarm, use it. A lot of people that have been hit, their alarm was off for one reason or another. So use it. Make it become a habit, even if you're home. If it becomes a habit, then you'll do it all the time. It's like getting in the car, you buckle up your seatbelt. When you come home, everybody's in the house, turn it on. And I suggest 3 different settings on your alarm system: home, away, and night stay. And what do I mean by night stay? Everybody knows home and away, right? Night stay is, especially if you've got different floors in your home, if you're all on the upper floor, night stay would arm everything, including motions downstairs, but turn off the motion where everybody sleeps. So what you try to do is set your alarm system that deals with your pattern of life that works. It's not inconvenient. And so for me, I started doing that because we live this world. So we're constantly, heck, we go to a bank ATM and we're like, it's like a combat mission. We're watching and looking around and checking, approaches. We think of this stuff all the time. So, most people don't, and that's good. That's what we're here for. But like when I set this stuff at home, my wife was like, "Are you kidding me?" And then like the next night, my cameras that I had set up caught neighbors' cars getting broken into, and she's like, "Okay, I get it." So, but make it a process you get used to and are comfortable with. And so night stay, what I did when we had little kids is we were all on the same floor. I put a little tiny wire across the stairs we would all go down in the morning. And if that little wire was up and you started down the stairs, it would just kind of hit you in the chest. And you go, "Oh, I got to turn the alarm off." Super easy to do. That way all the motions on the main floor and the basement were on. Everything was on. And so your house, look for a way to arm yourself night stay so it gives you a broader envelope of protection with your already paid for system. The other thing, when we're talking about systems, hardwired, because you'll see jammers, they jam wireless signals. And that can be a wireless signal from a camera. It can be a wireless signal from your alarm system trying to report out. It can be a wireless signal from your contact on the window or doors or your glass breaks if it's wireless, like Simply Safe. That's all wireless. And some of the alarm companies will say, "Well, we're encrypted and we do rotating, frequencies." Well, that's good as long as the whole band of frequencies is not already being jammed. So that's why hardwired isn't subject to wireless jamming. And the wireless jamming can affect not only cameras and alarms, cellular. So you may not even be able to call out. Because we have seen around the country where cell phones were completely useless. So hardwired if you can, hardwired motions at least if you can, one on every floor. Redundant communication out. So kind of back to the old days, everybody had a landline and everybody got rid of it. Now everybody wants a landline again. So if you can get a landline, that's your first choice out. Have the line buried so it's not easily cuttable. But we've not seen them cutting lines. They're using electronics. So first out, landline. Second would be VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocols, which is like your telephone that uses your internet provider. Your third would be a cellular dial out, and your fourth is radio. So if you can get redundancy in your alarm system, have all 4. Try to put the placement point more towards the front and high up where it's broadcasting. Less likely to be jammed if they're coming in from the back. That face of the house may affect the jamming to the front and higher up. So have redundancy of communication. Try to keep your valuables in something that's not movable. And a lot of people will say, well, heck, I got a 5-foot safe and it took 2 or 3 of us to get it in here. Well, they're coming with crews of 3 or 4 and they don't care about banging your walls. So that's not a guarantee, and you'll see that shortly. So if you're going to use a safe, make sure it is extremely well bolted to the cement or some fashion, number 1. And number 2, if you can, during this time until this settles down a bit, maybe you don't want to keep, if you've got a lot of jewelry, maybe you get a safety deposit box and keep at home the stuff you really wear a lot. If you got family heirlooms that you're just keeping at the house, they were mom's, and you're not wearing it every day, maybe you think a better way to store it, and that might be a safe that's really, really well secured in the basement, or a safety deposit box. Just things to think about. Everyone's going to have to kind of come to your own conclusion what you have and how you want to protect it. Obviously, when you design your system or work with your security professional, you're going to want 360-degree coverage around the outside of the house, overlapping what we would call in the military field of fire, so that one camera looks across and there's no gaps. And again, hardwired if possible. So these are the crews that were arrested and lodged in my jail, all from Chile. And this is some of the videos. You'll see how quick it is. This is the breacher. Watch how quick he pops this window. The window's broken. Bam, that fast, they're through it. They're in the house. Here comes the safe. Again, they're not worried about neighbors seeing in very private homes or damage. That was a 5-foot tall safe, heavy. You can see he just spotted that camera and they moved away from it. So they're situationally aware. Even if their pre-op surveillance didn't detect a camera, they are looking for them. And that doesn't dissuade them, they're just aware of it. Now watch this. He's a breacher. The guy behind him is the electronic warfare guy. He's got the jammer. So windows open, he's got the jammer. One other guy's watching his electronics for any kind of activity. You'll see the guy actually extend the jammer into the house. To see if they have defeated the alarm. And then they're watching to see if anything's going on. Once they feel comfortable, in they go. Seconds. Here comes another house, another safe. Another safe. That's what I'm saying. Big safes, you think, oh, it's heavy. They're not going to get this safe. Yes, they will. And you can see on the far right, they've actually smashed through a glass kind of overlook, and they're just pushing it right out through. So I didn't want to get too deep into everything. I wanted to kind of give you the 20,000-foot level and then really throw it open for questions for the chief, captain, or I that you may have about this. I think, you kind of got the summary. Now, if you have any particular questions that you have, Mandy, there's a couple right here. Mandy's got the mic, and she's going to be running to you with a mic.
Testing. Hello? Hi, I want to find out when you arrested people and they were in jail, are they still in jail or they get out or what's the deal?
Yeah, so here and in the other state where some of our folks are, they're still in jail pending trial.
I prefer to sit down.
We've not seen that in other states, but here they're in jail. Yes.
Hi, I'd just like to ask about pets. Are they harming pets? Are they taking pets? What about small dogs?
We've not seen any action against a pet, but I would use this opportunity to tell you we don't see pets necessarily as a good security. I mean, if they're this methodical, they certainly can bring a piece of meat and put some sleeping agent in it and toss it in and give it a few minutes. So,
Just on that. We, out of all the home invasions we had, one of the houses had pets in it, and we believe the burglars fled as soon as the dog started barking and walking towards that room, because that's also the only one that was occupied by a person. And as soon as they realized there was somebody in the house, there was dogs in the house, they ran out with a lot less than they came at, than they probably would have been. So it was a small deterrent, but I think it was more the fact that the homeowner was actually home. No, they don't want any contact with that so far.
What brand of safe should we buy? What's the best?
I don't know that there's a particular brand. I mean, I wish I had like an endorsement or something, but I would just pick a brand that is, got bolts that run both the sides. So when you throw it, it actually puts it into both sides of the door, not just one side, number one. Number two, if you're getting one, you might as well get one that's fire rated. And number three, has the ability to be attached in a significant way to the floor or whatever you're attaching to that prevents it from being taken.
Thank you. This has been very informative, but sometimes I feel that too much comes out from the media, especially. Who's to say, with all this information that you just gave us and show us, that they're not here, one of the teams?
They are very adaptive. I don't think they'd want to show themselves in this environment. But if they do, good. Don't come back. Because we're going to be relentless looking for you. If you hit our area, we're going to be relentless. There's no end for us where we're going to quit looking for you. So go somewhere else would be my message if they're here.
Have any of them been stopped by a homeowner's bullet?
No, at least not here. No one has had a confrontation and shot anybody. There has, again, the number of cases we've had here where someone was home where I don't think were expected to be there. As soon as the Chileans that have been hitting here, they fled. In one home, I recall, there was a firearm that they actually took, which was unusual, but then it was found in the bushes. And I think it was taken because there was someone home and they were fleeing and they thought, we'll take it so they can't use it against us, and then they got rid of it. But again, the Colombians in other states have shown a willingness to be violent and have carried weapons. So there's no guarantee of that.
So as a follow-up to that, in the event that they do get a little bit more bold and they do come in as a homeowner that's armed, what happens if we shoot them?
Yeah, so...
Well, let's be
Yeah.
realistic. They're getting more and more bold.
Yeah, no, if you're in your home and you have a weapon in your home, you have the right to defend yourself under Michigan state law. You have a right, if you feel your life or someone else's in immediate jeopardy, you have a right to use force against that person to stop that threat.
How about you just think they're stealing, but they're not threatening their life?
Well, I mean, if you're in your house and it's at night and they're coming in, I'm not sure you have time to interview them. But that would be up to you. I mean, if somebody's coming in my house at night and I'm, seeing them come into my bedroom, I don't think they're coming there just to steal and no harm, no foul. I think, there's a real possibility somebody could get hurt or killed in my family. That's me. Everybody's got to make their own decision. But legally, if you believe your life is in jeopardy or potentially in jeopardy, you have a right to defend yourself.
That gang that was put in jail, what resulted from that? A slowdown in burglaries?
After the question was, and we'll try to stick with the microphone if we could, because so other people can hear the question, but the question was, what's happened to those other crews? Did it slow down once we caught the two different crews? It slowed down, I think, more so because not only were crews caught, but we announced all of us are working together. We created a task force with state, local, and federal agencies, and we're all committed to catching people if they come in here and do it. So I think that was okay, let's go somewhere else and let this cool down. I think they did that. But there's too many valuables here. Imagine if you're pulling, at one point we thought potentially up to $1 million a week out of Oakland County. Now, if you're doing that and you're from Chile, that's life changing.
When was the most recent break-in?
2 weeks. But let's try to keep the microphone.
And real quick, sir, on that note, these investigations are extensive. One of the things that we try to do here in Oakland County is make it very well known that we'll work with, whether it's our local prosecuting attorney's office or the Attorney General's office. They've been in part of our task force meetings, that we're charging the highest level crimes we can, whether it's a continuing criminal enterprise charge, meaning it's a organized group, or some type of organized crime at the state level with the Attorney General's office, because they're hitting so many areas. The crew that he is talking about was actually developed through the Oakland Township substation, and they deserve a lot of credit. They're kind of our local experts out there in Oakland Township, but they worked with our Attorney General's office, and with some pressure from the sheriff, we were able to get those charges quite high, and hopefully that word's getting out that we're getting 20-year felonies on some of these individuals, and not just your standard 5 to 10 year on a home invasion.
And that's a really good point, because a lot of crews in other states, if they get charged with a 4-year felony, they think that's not a bad price of admission for what they've already sent home. We tried to get and got ongoing criminal enterprise, and that sent a pretty big message, because that hadn't happened across the country, that we're going to drop everything we can on you if you hit this area.
Why does this Chilean visa exist, and is there anything we can do towards stopping that?
Yeah, I've asked to have it paused or discontinued based on this, based on the facts that we've caught multiple crews just here, but they're all across the country have been caught, and that's a problem. But ultimately, it's a Washington decision. So I would encourage you to reach out to your members of Congress and say, at the very least, pause the VWP for Chile, and don't authorize it for Colombia until we get a handle on what's happening. This is a nationwide issue now.
I think many of us have fitness clubs, and I do, when mine happens to be in Washington County, but they've been hit 3 times by a group from Romania, and it seems to be pretty prevalent also.
Yeah, that's a whole different topic. Fitness clubs, or the purse snatchers, or the larceny gangs that are operating all across the country. That's a whole different thing. Not that we're not concerned about that, but when someone's coming into your house, the potential for that escalating versus maybe a wallet being stolen is significantly higher. But that's a problem as well. Maybe that's another town hall. I know that very personally. Let's stick with the mic. She'll come to you after she gets us.
The question was kind of straightforward and simple, but how much cooperation do you actually get from the federal government? Be it Homeland Security, Kay? I mean...
The actual agents and worker bees on the ground are great partners. Some of the policy decisions that are made in Washington, not so helpful. So, the frontline folks that we interact with every day, they're great partners. I mean, they want to help. They signed up for the same reason I did when I became a cop. I want to make a difference. I want to protect the community that I serve. that's the frontline workers feel the same way. Thank you. I think you had a question up here too.
Not a question, really more of a comment to follow up a little bit. My home was burglarized in February. I happened to be in Florida away for several months. We live in a gated community. I came home to take care of some things, taxes and some things that needed to be done and taken care of. Been home for about an hour, everything seemed normal, turned my alarm off and everything. Went upstairs to find my bedroom had been broken into and breached and completely ransacked. The interesting thing was that in the nightstand next to my bed, I keep a small 9mm weapon in a Sentry safe with fingerprint access. That safe was gone. Probably weighs about 20, 25 pounds. In my closet, master closet, zipped into a bag, I also had a shotgun. And it seemed like both of those, in fact, they were gone. I immediately reported it, called the Bloomfield Township Police, spoke with several detectives there. We had 4 detectives, police at our home, probably when I discovered this was about 10:30. And the police department was there, very responsive, and there till probably about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, taking pictures and everything. Later during that search, while the officers were there, they found the shotgun in the bathtub, still zipped in the bag, so they didn't take that. A couple weeks later, my wife was vacuuming under the bed, and she came down to me after I had reported that safe missing. The safe was under the king-size bed, under the headboard, up against the wall. You couldn't put it any further away than really what it was. She happened to bump it with the vacuum cleaner, and lo and behold, the weapon, the 9mm, was still in the safe and untouched. So, a registered weapon, by the way, but I thought that was very interesting. They didn't want that safe, and they didn't want that shotgun.
Yeah, they didn't want to get caught with a firearm, and they probably, like I said in the one case, were putting it in a place where it wasn't going to be immediately accessible in case they encountered a homeowner. The homeowner usually would go right to the spot, and they wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
So,
but they did like her Louis Vuitton bags.
That they very much liked. Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering if you'd had any success at going after some of the fencing operations that these guys are using.
We're working that with our partners, but that's harder to get because, every state's different. So in Michigan, we have a certain kind of thing with pawn shops and legitimate, people that buy things secondhand. They have to register it. Every state's different. And obviously, these folks have a prearranged people that probably do not want to necessarily even comply with the law because of the lucrative nature of what they're doing. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, we both identified or tried to identify and worked. Actually, New York HSI came here and met with our detectives at Bloomfield Township as we thought we identified a fence in New York. But trying to put a face to these fences that are operated through the online systems are almost completely impossible. I know Captain Vance Mays will address that as well. One of the recommendations, though, when you're talking about is take pictures of serial numbers, especially if you have Rolex or high-end watches. Having that information is valuable to us. If the watches were not to be melted down and resold, there's databases that can let a fence know whether they're a legitimate jewelry company or not, whether that watch is stolen.
And just like he said, we worked with York. One of our homeowners found a watch of his that was taken at a pawn shop in Miami, Florida. So we made contact with our colleagues down in Miami, and they went to the pawn shop. The guy just happened to be out of town, was supposed to come back the next week, and never came back to his pawn shop. So we found out that it was an online pawn shop, and he was using that address just as a front and was taking it back to Chile.
Yeah, and that's a good suggestion. Take pictures of your valuables in general, and don't just leave it on your phone. Because lots of times people have their purse stolen, and their phone has every picture of everything valuable in it, and then out goes the phone. So make sure you're backing that up to the cloud or something. quick sharing of that information to whoever's the investigating agency of, here's the serial numbers, here's what it looks like, here's my credit cards that were here. All of that stuff that's at your fingertips, the sooner you can do that, the better.
Nice to see you. So in summary, it appears as though these guys are coming in and getting out as quickly as possible. Is that a fair statement?
They're getting out after they either A, feel the heat, or they've accomplished what they think is enough.
So if you talk about breaching through glass, for instance, standard glass in the US, we've talked about this, is pretty weak. But if you get into more high security glass, does that tend to slow them down, and are they going to go to the next low-hanging fruit, or are they going to continue to try to breach through?
Yeah, I mean, and there's companies that do glazing, and there's companies that do an applique to make the windows less shatterable, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that delays and causes problems is a ticking clock. They don't like to be obviously outside banging or making noise or not getting in. So the more you can delay, the more you can frustrate, the chances are they may move on. There's no guarantee. And if they've done significant pre-op surveillance and you haven't done everything, they may find a weakness. I know in a number of these homes, they tried multiple entry points in some of them. You know, some of them, they're just like that you saw, they're really in quick. And a couple of them, they tried this and not so good. And then they went over here and tried that. And this one, that's in, we're in.
So what you guys have not witnessed is trying to breach a safe on site. They want to take it off site and breach it later. They're not coming in with gas powered diamond saws.
No, I mean, they're coming in with crowbars and things.
There was one of ours where they spent an extensive amount of time in the residence, but they were very comfortable knowing somebody wasn't home, and how we knew that. But during one of the videos, they actually retreated a couple times outside the home and almost like huddled up in the backyard to see and wait to see if there was the police coming, the homeowner coming home, and when they were comfortable, they went right back in. We found that on some, and we just heard one recently, where they actually had a diamond tester on their person. And some of the precious metal testers that have been, so these are, they're very sophisticated. In one of ours, the one that from late last November, they hit Bloomfield Hills. They for some reason, they like the Woodward corridor. And so they hit Bloomfield Hills. They hit a house where you saw them pushing the safe along the back of the home. That was one in Bloomfield Township. Our officers were already en route to that area after Bloomfield Hills got hit. So we were literally a minute behind them. Unfortunately, fortunately for us, their car got stuck where they were trying to push that safe. The car got stuck in the front yard, and that's when an alert neighbor called and said, we hear some foreign language being yelled in the neighborhood, and immediately that's a red flag for us on that night. But because Bloomfield Hills was hit, we thought, we're gonna catch them. They're stuck in the front yard, we've got them, and actually was two separate crews. One that was hit in Bloomfield Township, one was hit in Bloomfield Hills, and our surveillance teams working with the Sheriff's Department was able to pick off that crew in West Virginia. So West Virginia was able to take them off for home invasions in Ohio. I don't know if we can tie them back to ours quite yet, but we're sure trying.
What time of day was that one?
So it kind of changed on us. Prior to the time change last fall, they were hitting anywhere from about 8 p.m. till 10-ish p.m. When the time change hit, literally that weekend, they hit us, I think yours was the first one where the homeowners were home, was close to about the 5:30 to 7:30 range. When they came back here this spring, it was the weekend after time change, and they hit again about the 9 p.m. hour.
How much do you think it makes a difference with security lighting around the perimeter?
If it draws attention, anything helps. But if you're completely isolated, there were a lot of lights on when you saw those safes being moved. Depends on their comfort level, depends on the observational probability of someone seeing them. And, if they go huddle somewhere and we're good, they go back.
What about music or TVs going on in the house? as a preventative maintenance?
You know, if you randomize something, but, you know, again, they're fairly sophisticated, so they may test it. I mean, if a light comes on they weren't expecting and they see movement, they may boogie it. And they're also, you know, I think they create a list of targets before they go out, so that if they go to house number 1, oh, Tim's home from college, target number 2. Because in one case, we believe a home was approached and somebody turned on a light inside and they left. And the house next door ended up getting hit. So I think and I know for a fact, a personal friend of mine, we found on pre-op surveillance on one of the teams that had been caught, but their house wasn't ever touched. So, you know, I think they create a target list. Captain, you want to say something?
What we're talking about, what the sheriff said about they'll go to the neighbor's house. Back in February, one of the teams that's in custody now down in Indiana, they came across Bloomfield Hills Country Club, across the golf course, because there's nobody out, and this was February of last year on Rathmore. And they were looking in several different windows along that golf course, and then they finally found one where it was obvious that somebody was not home, and they went in and got their stuff. We think that was one of the first crews that was in their area. We think they're rookies because they had a lot of stuff on their phones, pictures of the neighborhood. They were driving through the neighborhoods and videotaping the houses as they drove through, and unfortunately for them, they didn't delete it, so that's what led them back to us. So they're nationwide equestrian farms, parks, golf courses, lakes, you know, where there's nobody in your backyard. So.
And just real quick on that, our East Side partners are here as well from the Clinton Township area, and they probably had the two recent home invasions, and that was exactly what they did. They missed. The one house was an empty, no hit for them. The second house was a decent hit for them. So they hit 2 homes next door to each other when one was dry.
Are you analyzing how they profile neighborhoods, towns, and targets? And, you know, are you profiling, or are you analyzing how they're profiling the groups?
Well, you know, we look at the targets that have been hit, but they're not cooperative. So, you know, we haven't people explained their process to us. But, you know, if we look at their targets, and sometimes we've captured, you know, data, then we get in to look at that. But I think the common thread is they're trying to find very high-end homes with high net worth items in it. One thing we do see very often is they target certain minorities that tend to be small business owners and may have cash in the home. So we've seen that in the Asian and some of the Arab communities that, you know, own businesses and bring the day's receipts home.
So they might be studying like social media activity and things like that.
I wouldn't put it past them, but there's so much available now. Just if you're sitting at a computer for 15 minutes, you can get a geo image of a home in the backyard of the neighbors. You can do a reverse lookup on the address, see the name, look up the name, go to LinkedIn. You can do so much workup like in 15 minutes on any given home, and then go out and do your operational surveillance.
Right.
But don't make it easy for them again and post, you know, I'm headed to Tahiti, and you know, that's just.
So I go out and exercise or run with a dog at night, and I see some suspicious looking cars or something else like that, and you don't want to be intrusive and, you know, looking in there and writing down license plate numbers, but, you know, heck, I kind of do that at Hammond Lake in case you know, and
I mean, if you're suspicious, as you run by, memorize the plate and call. Absolutely. Like I said, we'd rather check out.
Is there anything there to look for? Probably not, right? But if somebody's got their phone up and it looks like they're taking videos or driving by.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's taking pictures of homes, whether on a cell or whether, you know, recently we saw a camera, you know, that gives reason to delve deeper, obviously.
Well, thanks, fellas. Thanks for, you know, putting in a good effort and chasing them down.
Sure.
Just one quick question. What's your estimate how many crews are working this area right now?
What's the estimate of who's coming, how many crews? There's no way to put an estimate on how many crews. You know, in that one case, it turned out there were two crews that night in the very same area, and the one retrieved the other crew. So it's impossible for you to know unless you know.
I know we got Real quick, just to give an idea of how fast they leave town, one of the safes that was recovered from an Oakland Township home invasion was actually recovered in a very two-tracked off-road by some duck hunters. The safe was found in a pond. And it was from a Oakland Township home invasion. So, it was probably several days later, so it wasn't much of a lead for us, but we believe that crew left town right away. Once they got their hit, off they went. So, and just to the other gentleman's question just before that as well, we've banged our head against every wall trying to figure out, okay, are they targeting auto executives? Are they targeting lawyers? Or if they are targeting lawyers, what kind of lawyers? And we are unable, other than the crew that is actually targeting, like the sheriff said, Asian business owners, which is part of this crew as well. We're not finding, when we think we find something, they throw us off base.
Yeah, they adapt and they change too. We've seen that here and nationally. If we find a pattern, they try to change the pattern. Can we stick with the mic?
Yeah.
Because
three quick questions. One, do you believe they have the capacity to move a 2,200-pound safe?
I think you're probably pretty good with the 2,200-pound safe. The chief and I could move that,
Okay.
but
Number
not
two,
everybody can.
Number two, in Michigan, is it illegal to wire the safe with 5,000 volts?
Yeah, it's illegal to wire anything with a booby trap.
Okay.
And there's no particular car.
Okay. Number three, you talked about hardware surveillance. Have there been any instances where the hardware has picked up an invasion in progress and the police have responded?
There has been hardwired systems that spotted people and the police have been called, but they vacated immediately upon seeing movement.
Thank you.
Just to elaborate on his last question, the last home invasion we had, the alarm came in and we got there and we think we missed them literally by a minute because it takes a little bit, once you break in that window and you're running upstairs, it takes, maybe there's a 45-second delay, right? So there's a delay, they get up to the room, oh my God, the alarm's going off. They ransack it real quick because they know there's also a delay by the time the alarm goes off and it gets to the alarm company who then calls the police department. There's probably about a 7-minute delay. So we get there within 7 minutes, maybe 5, and they're out the back door. So there's a delay. I know in Bloomfield Hills you can have your alarm directly wired to our station. So it eliminates that middleman. It goes right to our dispatcher and we can increase our response time. So that's an option that we offer.
Yeah, that's unusual. Yeah, most communities, it has to go to an alarm company, and most alarm companies call you first, so that layers the delay.
In our neighborhood, we've ended up where a lot of cars are getting broken into. They break the windows, and they're taking the registration and the insurance cards out of the glove compartment. So, and then they'll come back a few days later, and they're hitting more cars. And they're cars that are parked in the driveway or on the streets. And they're hitting my daughter's neighborhood, the same thing, hitting cars.
Yeah, that's probably not these high-end crews. Larceny from autos, lots of times we've seen teenagers do that. Just a point of caution, if your car's outside, a lot of people leave their garage door opener in it. That's not a great idea. And at the very least, a lot of people also leave the interior door unlocked. So they hit the door and then they can just go in.
Well, it's interesting.
Just keep safety in mind with whatever your practices are.
Well, you talked about how they're all dressed and everything, and a lot of the Ring cameras in our neighborhood had picked them up, and they're all in dark, completely covered up. Yeah. You see a car cruise, hop out, hitting the cars, and then they get back in the car and go.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of those. Those have gone on for, I mentioned at the beginning of this, where my cameras caught the neighbor's cars getting broken into, and they were high school teenagers. Ultimately, they were caught. They try to conceal their identity, but investigative techniques sometimes track them anyway. But that's not the crews that we're talking about.
What would be the purpose of taking the registration and the insurance cards?
They may just be gathering whatever they can in the car.
I thought my son had a great idea. He bought a home. He lives out of state. But if you've had your house on the market or just bought a home, you can call Zillow and all these places and have the films removed. And if it's on the MLS, that's another thing. You can ask your realtor to get all of that, because that's a great way. His house, when he bought it, I could see the corner and see if there was dust in it. So,
Was there?
no. He likes his dark floor so he can see if there's dust on it. The other thing that I read about, and I don't know how to do it, is to, you can white out or smudge out on Google your yard from an aerial view. Have you heard of that?
With certain kinds of, certain people and certain kinds of things can contact Google for security reasons and get their properties blurred, but I don't think that's for everybody. I don't know what their parameters are.
Hi. Would you recommend, if you're out of town with your wife, out of the country possibly, and you have a 20-year-old daughter staying home alone, should she have another adult with her there? And you're kind of on a street that's kind of a little, excluded and wooded. And
I mean, that's a multi-layered question because, some 20-year-olds are a whole lot more, responsible than others. I mean, one kid I might leave home, and one kid I'm going to send my brother over there to stay with you.
But I'm worried that by herself, would they see that?
So we've seen them so far, this group, to be contact adverse. That doesn't mean other groups aren't. I would just encourage her to use some basic situational awareness, use an alarm, have, cell phones by her, not panic about it. I mean, but,
right.
Knowledge is power and awareness is power.
And back to the yard lights, if we have a lot of yard lights, should we use them?
I think yard lights, especially if you're home, let you see probably easier than them seeing you. And the motions that I put around my house, they blink 3 times before they come on steady. And that draws my attention. If I'm sound asleep, believe it or not, if my backyard light starts blinking, I wake up. I mean, that just again may be us, but it draws your attention, draws the neighbor attention if something's flashing a few times. So you can get outside motions that have that setting. Anything you can do to A, light it up, and B, draw attention to it is a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
So I've got kind of a 3-parter here. These people that are coming over, are they all illegally in this country?
So the Colombians typically are, the Venezuelans typically are, the Chileans, so far we have seen, have utilized the VWP. So initially they're legal here, sort of, as long as they provided actual identification names that match who they really are, but we can't verify that. But once they get here, they immediately become illegal in their presence here because they discard most of that, get false ID, and begin committing crimes.
And how secure is the Canadian border in relation to some of these people?
Canadian border is a big challenge. The only terrorist actually stopped at the border on the way to an attack was at the northern border.
And what about squatting? Have you had that problem in Oakland County at all?
We haven't had a big problem with that.
And there's no limit placed on these stolen goods, like in New York, California. Oh, you can steal up to $1,000, you're okay.
No, we don't play that game here.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff.
Michael, everyone, appreciate your service and thank you for everything you do. You mentioned about going direct to law enforcement alarm. In a lot of communities, they have rapid SOS, which goes direct to the station, immediate response. Is that a legislative thing that not allowed here, or is that something, because that reduces the time?
Well, your 911 can go to, your rapid SOS can go to, but that's not your alarm. That's on your phone, you mean, that rapid SOS, the informational?
No, I'm on a board of a company called Skybell, and they have rapid SOS in a lot of communities around the country, so you can hit it. So you just hit a button, or it's through your alarm system.
Most require it to go to a third party, and I think, as the chief just mentioned, the 911 protocols are not allowing that to come into the because you get so many false alarms.
Okay, I got it.
So they like a screening methodology that, you may have 100 alarms come in that night.
Right.
They get screened by alarm companies, and only 2 are actually dispatched.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah, there's new legislation. If some homes are grandfathered in, I can tell you many of the houses in Bloomfield Hills and as they transition are, one of the things, I don't know if Captain Tom Vansamez said it, was the delay when that phone call is made from the alarm company, it's typically to a homeowner first. If you live in one of these target style homes, I would highly recommend going with them calling the police department first prior to the homeowner. That delay recently cost minutes for Bloomfield Hills when they actually had somebody on the street in a plainclothes car. But unfortunately, there was a good 6-minute delay about. But the officer was right there. So it's that delay from the time the alarm goes off to they call the homeowner to verify whether they want police sent or not. And if I'm telling you, right about now, until we get a handle on this, if you live in their target style home, I would have them call the police, and I would not cancel them. Yep, I think some agencies charge $35 or after you get $25 to $35 per alarm. But that's just another key for you. We'll work with you at that point to say, hey, let's get your sensors fixed if it's a false alarm all the time. Plus storms and stuff, I think we waive that. So,
one more quick question. Are you seeing community surveillance with alarms for a homeowners association where they're tracking, cars going in and out of the subdivisions and/or private roads?
Yes.
And how do we try to put that together with our homeowners association and/or community?
So, that would be a homeowner meeting, and if you're living in whatever community, talk to the chief or the captain of that community to see if it's something they, would suggest, what kind of program might be available, what kind of cost implications, things like that.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Sure.
I understand you are not endorsed by alarm companies, but which alarm company would you think is most useful?
Yeah, the one that works. I can't tell you which alarm company is the most useful. What I will tell you is my personal philosophy is don't give anybody the keys to the kingdom. So if your alarm company is one thing, your camera company should be somebody else. Because, a lot of the big breaches we've seen in different companies, somebody has access to their data. And, one of the biggest identity thefts happened in Blue Cross. The person just went in and sold a whole bunch of data. So if you have, the alarm company has your cameras and your alarm, and there's administrator codes, depending on the alarm and the alarm company, they could either A, potentially disarm it, or B, not report it if they're working that desk. But if you've got layers, if you've got cameras that motion sensors send your phone a notice, and you've got a different alarm company as something else, and you have a smart lock, that's somebody else, layer it, in my opinion.
I'm just curious, and this one gentleman in front had his home invaded, but how many homes approximately in Oakland County have been breached?
40? We had 10, they had about 10, I think countywide last time was.
Yeah, 40, 50. Some of them we don't know for sure because they may have before we're like, okay, this is something much bigger. I know Oakland Township, he's mentioned, that's one of our substations patrols Oakland Township. They were very much on the target list. And one of the first that was really getting hammered in Oakland County. And that's why my substation is kind of the in-house expert, because they had to come up to speed so fast. So maybe 40, maybe more. but there's been others, you know, there's now, I think Northville got hit recently, and I know the Points have been hit. And on the ongoing criminal enterprise case that was put together, that included some homes on the west side of the state.
What help are you getting from local governments, and what more help do you need, if any?
That's a layered question. It depends on the local government. You know, we have not received any more resources at the sheriff's office, so we're just kind of juggling. I would like to have a couple full-time people assigned to it from us, and a couple, you know, maybe one from each other agency, but the resources aren't there, and frankly, we're kind of low on the priority list. So.
From our local level, from the township, and I don't want to speak on Bloomfield Hills, but we've been given our administrative staff is told us to get what we can get reasonably, right? But we work so closely with, the sheriff's department has the majority of the large toys, the helicopter, the things of that nature that it takes to investigate one of these. And just to give you an idea what an investigation like this looks like, on one of our home invasions from last September, which was kind of what really prompted back for us the Labor Day weekend last year, we're at about 40 or 50 search warrants just on that one home. And now multiply that by 11 or 10, 12 others. Now that we're coordinating together, we're able to do a lot of other things. But these technology companies aren't law enforcement friendly. So we're constantly we're chasing things at times that come up really on a dead end when you get into some of these companies. Money talks, and they don't want to talk to us.
Just want to talk about resources real quick. Bloomfield Hills, very small department. Bloomfield Township's a little bit bigger. The sheriff's department's the biggest one in the county, obviously. And it was tough right at the beginning, and then the sheriff put the task force together. And I think when you asked for that meeting, I expected 12 people to show up, and I think we had 70 or 80. And we're talking from the FBI all the way down to everybody local showed up. And since then, if we have an incident or we're predicting one, which we do quite a bit with the statistics we gather, we can call all these other agencies, and they are sending people, animals, they're sending electronic devices that we can use for surveillance. So the amount of resources that we can get just by saying, hey, we think this is a prime weekend in this area, we'll saturate that neighborhood with patrol and other resources. So we're getting a lot of resources. I know our city's given us the blessing to go ahead and do what we have to do to do surveillance and catch these guys. So,
and that comes from pooling our resources, which is important for us to do. But sometimes even then we don't have everything we need. So like the helicopters, both my helicopters are 21 and 22 years old, and they're beyond the service life recommended for those airships, and I still have no support from the county to replace them. And they're critical not just for something like this, for Overwatch, for the Dream Cruise, for, this is one of the things we deal with, but we try to think about everything, whether it's an active shooter. You look at parades in Highland Park, Illinois, a guy was shooting from the rooftop at a parade. So we do Overwatches at parades now. So these assets are critically important. So assets are important. That's all I can say. And we need to replace some of that stuff for the county. Because
radiothon is what you need.
A what?
A radiothon.
Yeah, a radiothon. Well, I do a bake sale, but I've done just about everything I can. But because anything we have at the county is everybody's. So if Bloomfield needs it, we send it immediately. And with almost 1,000 square miles in Oakland County, that's really the best place to house expensive equipment so it can serve everybody. But it's become more a challenge to get it. Yep.
Yeah, of the people you have caught already, have any of them been convicted?
No, still pending. All the folks that have been caught are still pending criminal trials.
Are they coming up soon, or are they,
I'm not even sure of the dates. I'd have to pull them. Everything takes time in the court system. We had the shooter from Oxford in my jail for over 2 years.
Okay. Well, the other question I had is, I had a security system that I had for many years, and I recently and a lot of it was hardwired. And I recently upgraded it with ADT. And when they came into my house, I wanted them to hardwire anything that was already hardwired, and they refused to do it. They said they will only do wireless. So are there any, is there anybody that really, will do hardwired?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier to do wireless. I understand why they do it, but it's not serving the cause. So that's really where you got to call around. Sometimes smaller boutique alarm companies still do it. They have technicians that will do it. And if you've got the wires already in the wall, they can reuse those and attach them, because your termination point is going to be where your alarm box is, and your contacts or your motions reuse the same wire and wire it into a newer system. And that's another thing. Wherever your alarm system terminates, wherever that box is, that should be protected some way. And not necessarily for this crew, but for other kinds of situations. You don't want that accessible if you're hosting a whole bunch of people in the house and that's in a spot where people can get to it. You just don't want that to be tampered with. Yes?
Given the incredible amount of work the Sheriff's Department does, has the Board of Commissioners given any reason they won't replace some of the outdated equipment, or they won't provide for those full-time deputies that you're looking for?
We're just not the top priority, I guess, is the quickest answer to that.
You mentioned that when you get resources from other agencies that they're animals, so you're using dogs out there in the field on these weekends. And what do they tell you? Because I always kind of trusted the intuition of dogs and trying to define what they're saying to me.
Yeah, so, a lot of us have dogs. We've got 30 in our agency. 17 are the big snarly types, and 13 are the little comfort trauma dogs. So we got a nice balance going there. But the tracking dogs will look for explosives. They'll look for items, depending on what they're trained for, and then they can track people, look for articles that have been discarded. So, like, I think after the burglaries in that one community, they put out your dog, or maybe our dogs, or maybe both, to do what we call an article search to try to find what path they took, were they still around, and did they discard anything as they fled.
We did have one last year that the dog came out and tracked from the back door through the woods and has stopped right where we believe the getaway car was sitting, and was through the woods, parked on the next street. And then on the way back, found jewelry that they had dropped, because that was the one where the alarm went off, they were spooked, and they ran, and they didn't even have everything concealed yet. So then we got out to the woods, they were dropping it as they went, and the dog found it. So that's how we use dogs.
Very grateful for you guys being here tonight and everything you do, so thank you very much. Back to the resource issue, do you ever use volunteers to help in ways that we might not be trained like you are, but for those of us who have an analytical background and do research and analysis that might be able to go through data for you? Are you open to anything like that to maybe take a little bit off your plate so that you can focus on training, where you're trained specifically?
That's a parsed question. So yes to the volunteers in certain communities for what's old is new, neighborhood watch kinds of things, so contact your local police department, whoever that may be, if it's us or one of these folks, to ask about neighborhood watch, or if you don't have it, starting one up in your neighborhood and doing that. In terms of analytics, I have my people kind of look at analytics, and I think a lot of agencies do it, but they do it as best they can because that's a limited resource. It'd be challenging to bring somebody in as a volunteer to give them access to data without a lot of background checks and understanding, that kind of thing. So there are some hurdles to that. We do it at the sheriff's office with retired police or military. So we have a cold homicide team that are all retired detectives. So if you come from a discipline like military or law enforcement, it makes it easier for us to plug you in, because some of the clearances that we have to jump through are easier to do, if that answers your question.
I'm one of these people that have an alarm but never turn it on. One, because we have a dog, and so then I have to turn off all the motions. What's the best thing to do if you have a dog when you leave the house? Is it better to put him in one room or let him have the run of the house to scare anybody off?
Yeah, I would confine the dog and set your alarm.
Set the motions?
Set the motions.
Okay.
That's what I would suggest. That's what I do. I just think that's a better choice. And then put them in the room where they sleep, either with you or someplace else at night when you set your arm stay that we talked about, because that gives you a better layer of protection. Because unless you got a trained dog, it could be barking at a burglar or a squirrel. And, you know, completely different reasons and reactions. Yes?
Hey, Sheriff, you'd mentioned that you knew that there was a group from Columbia in the county in the past 2 weeks. Is there anything more? Was that through a burglary or?
I can't get into how we know or what we know on that one because there was no criminal activity, but we know.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, just because I asked this fine gentleman behind the camera, he told me that your entire presentation will be available on CBS, right? Oh, I guess I'm trying to understand, is there a way to digitally capture your presentation to share with others or through HOAs?
Yeah, I think the Cable Vision did it.
Bloomfield Township, and also there'll be a link as well.
I guess Bloomfield Township Cable Vision did it, and there'll be a link. Yeah, I mean, we can share it. Yeah.
I just had a follow-up question on the jamming devices. Are there any devices that you're aware of that will alert you when your alarm system is possibly being jammed?
You'd have to have a whole different layer in your system that it would be the electronic version of a tamper notification. So a lot of systems, like on your alarm box that I just mentioned, you can put a tamper switch on that, so if it's opened, it actually sends an alarm signal, a tamper on that box. Or you can put tamper kinds of switches. There's an electronic version of that, but that's way different, and it's not very common. What you might see, though, before that is your cell phone or something may stop working. But that, I don't know. Anybody else have anything?
One of the houses that we had broken into, the neighbors said that he lost his Wi-Fi connection the day before. His kid was complaining he couldn't look on TikTok or whatever. And they had the tech come out and he said, I don't know what's wrong with it. And lo and behold, the next day, the neighbor's house got broken into. The most recent one we had, the neighbor to the back, his camera, when we went to go review his video cameras, his cameras went down 40 minutes before the house got broken into. So we believe the bad guys were dropped off in the woods, they jammed all the camera systems around it, and then they committed the crime. So if you notice that your internet's down, call your service provider and don't be afraid to call us. Say, hey, just so you know, we're in an area that could be hit from these burglars and our internet just crashed. And nothing up, we'll send a car over and look through the neighborhood.
I wear everybody out? Oh, one more. Two more. Guess not.
So you say they come through parks and golf courses, et cetera. What about lakes? You see them coming across lakes?
Yeah, I mean, anything that, we haven't seen them in a boat per se, but usually lakes have a private access, so they may come through along the lake line and then come up. If your backyard is very private, regardless of what it faces, whether it's a golf course or a lake or woods, that's a target of choice.
Are they using drones to look into our homes?
Yeah, we don't think they're looking in per se, but they may be sizing up the approaches and the viewpoints from neighbors.
Just real quick about the question regarding the jamming detection. There's a gentleman on Instagram. His name's Ryan Montgomery. He's in that field. His Instagram handle is 0day, and you could probably find the answer to your question there.
Oh, I'm sure there's systems that do it, but I'm saying in a regular alarm system, it's probably cost prohibitive. Once you get into counter electronic surveillance for an average home burglary system, it's very much possible. And I had a son who's in the military, and I know about electronic warfare, and I've got a top secret clearance. So I know it's possible. I'm not saying it's cost efficient.
Hi, Sheriff. I'm Carrie Lazat with Bloomfield Community Television, and that's where everybody can search on YouTube and watch this broadcast on Bloomfield Community Television. We also broadcast to the 6 communities, including Bloomfield Hills, Bloomfield Township, Birmingham, Beverly Hills, Franklin, and Bingham Farms.
Hi, Troy Police posted on their Facebook page last year that they caught 4 people. Do you know what the outcome of those were?
Troy Police caught 4 people for what?
That were breaking in a house, and they were from, they were illegals.
I'm not aware of that. I know Troy was involved with probably the Violent Crime Task Force, yeah. And I think Troy was involved in the jewelry robberies. So maybe that, rather than the burglaries, it was jewelry robberies. Oakland Mall, because that was one of the malls that was hit before they got caught at Great Lakes. Sorry? Not that I'm aware of, but it's possible. And yeah, here's another thing that's going on, which is super bizarre and super dangerous in today's world. There's some kind of TikTok challenge for teenagers to kick in doors of people's homes. And we saw 2 of those in one night in one of the communities we police. And that's a recipe for really bad outcomes. So if you got young kids, anything that's a challenge on TikTok is probably not so good. Yes?
You mentioned they like to get in and out quickly. Is there some low-tech device like air tags? Have you put them all over the place in your jewelry that they'll run off with the air tags?
Or not, they'll leave the container and just take the jewelry. So unless you had a air tag on your necklace, but they're leaving the jewelry boxes, or unless you take the whole safe again, you know. But chances are we're going to find a empty safe a mile from your house.
Anybody else? Well, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Thanks to Christ Church Cranbrook for being an amazing host, and the Realtors for helping spread the word. Watch out on your friends, your neighbors. Don't be afraid to call. Have a great night.